Well, this is the frontline splash on the so-called rival title for the Rupert Murdoch dirty digging scum on Sunday. And we shall explain why we are calling it scum on Sunday as well. This is quite apart from the local kind of differences and details of the arguments in favor of local lockdown and against local lockdown. The essential point about two-faced double standards exposed in the behavior and policies of the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal is what we are going to focus on. Look at this, as we said, the dirty digger became a billionaire by this scum excelling in, or rather exploiting, the female body, young female body. Most of the young female body has been white female body, but it makes no difference. Whatever color or ethnicity of the female body, the essential structure is the female body that the scum over exploited for decades and made Rupert Murdoch a billionaire. This is the title. The main thing is the scum that made Dirty Digger the billionaire. And this headline on the front page of this Scum on Sunday sums up the absolute brazen dishonesty of Murdoch. And we shall go into some detail about that with the evidence. This is the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. That is the street that actually is treated as the collective name of the printed, quote, newspapers published from London, the daily newspapers, not the localized kind of imitations of newspapers. About the imitations, we shall be talking later. Now, the scum is, first of all, is in denial about the fact that there is a raging kind of crisis of government in the context of the duties owed to the people affected by the lack of governance and lack of accountability, lack of service. That headline is not about the crisis at all, is it? So that headline, that front page splash, is business as usual by the pornographic Rupert Murdoch. Okay? And it shows two fingers to the people who are victims of both the virus and of the absence of cure, treatment, respect, recognition, support that are owed to all the victims by the state, by the local councils, and by the central government. So that's number one, that they are not, it's gone. And this mentality is only to be found in the behavior of Murdoch's protege in the White House now. I mean, talking about Murdoch's proteges, we refer to the evidence that came out during the kind of representation by various persons before the Levison inquiry, where it was shown that Rebecca Brooks was treated as more important than any other person in the whole country by every occupant in number 10 Downing Street. Tony Blair, David Cameron, and whoever else was in between. We are not mentioning Gordon Brown in that way because during the run-up to the Levison inquiry, Gordon Brown decided to stage a kind of stunt so that he could come across as being not in Murdoch's pocket. But essentially, Murdoch called the political shots in this country, and that is where the overwhelming majority of the gullibles that the Fleet Street tabloids like the Scum target have been actually influenced. Because no matter what the political argument, what the evidence around them in their own communities, the gullibles are absolutely clearly, demonstrably, basically influenced in their behavior, in their support and lack of support, whichever is the case, based on what the Murdoch Scum actually peddles. And going back to the last almost 40 years, the Scum has been persistently responsible for distorting the actual political behavior and realities by various parties involved in the government or in opposition in this country. And the notorious headline on the front page of the Scum against Neil Kinnock. Neil Kinnock is not somebody that we rate highly ourselves, but our rating him lowly and poorly is nothing whatsoever to do with the criteria used by the corrupt Sun. And we rate Kinnock as one of the worst leaders of the opposition Labour Party ever, based on his evidence and his own incompetence and corruption and stupidity and lack of understanding and lack of connection with the realities of the world and society. And Kinnock was a racist, is a racist, as was John Prescott. For many years, Tony Blair's kind of stooge to hoodwink the gullibles into thinking that Prescott was carrying out the working classes kind of in-touch kind of connections. He was doing the opposite. So going back to the Scum and how the Murdoch dirty digger was exposed during the Levison inquiry, although the Levison inquiry didn't produce any changes, it did provide this opportunity. This is the only reason why the Levison inquiry is important, as part of the source of such a lot of information about what went on. And so Murdoch was openly accused of controlling the British government or the British elections as well. So both of those revelations that came before, years before Cameron gave the Brexiteers the opportunity and created the excuse and the pretext for all the other liars like Cambridge Analytica and Facebook to distort and mess up whatever remaining pretense of democracy there might have been by then. So when the Scum says that there is a 25-year-old marriage that has been kind of destroyed by the adultery and treachery of a man, what does it say? It says that there is no pandemic, there is no crisis, even economic, social, nothing. It's only about sex. Let's be brazen about it. We are not being brazen as the Scum is. And the only other person that believes that there is no crisis called the COVID-19 or the virus or the coronavirus, who is it? It's Murdoch's mate in the White House now. Trump has declared in the last 24 hours that there is no such thing as virus. There is no such thing as infection. He's abolished it. Now, what more do people need as proof? That he's a liar and he's a criminally intending liar. And he's faking things much worse than any of the outlets that he accuses of circulating fake news against him when they tell the factually sustained truth about his various misconduct and criminality. So it's Murdoch, son on Sunday so called, and Donald Trump have abolished the pandemic. There is no problem. And this is the proof. They are actually celebrating it with the headline, creepy, sick-making headline. Trumped it. They're calling it, he trumped it, yeah? And they're saying in there that maskless, he doesn't care about the mask, does he? Because he is beyond the reach of the pandemic and the virus that is affecting everyone else. Maskless president is the editor, US editor James Beale is the headline. Kind of this piece is byline to US editor James Beale. Maskless president, Trump whips off his mask on the balcony of the White House for a rally, just 5 days after he was released from hospital with coronavirus. The US press leader, he's not US leader for heaven's sake. He's Donald Trump. He's not US leader by any stretch. US leader, 74, spoke at a peaceful protest backing law and order on the South Lawn yesterday, where a crowd of several hundred supporters, mainly Black and Latino, didn't socially distance. So he's infected these stooged crowd, several hundred Latinos and kind of other Black people, with his corrupt behavior. It was not an official campaign gathering, but he will go to Florida, Iowa, and Pennsylvania for rallies next week. The president said, "I'm feeling great. It's like America. He's making America great again. I want to thank you for your prayers. It's been an incredible outpouring." Now, how does he believe in prayers? He is the one who decried people for their faith, and he capitalized on the hatred of the Muslims in order to come across as the candidate they should be voting for in 2016. But there is no details about that. There is no discussion. 2 pages more on the front page, My Fury at Rat Ebra by wife Sandra, United legend blasted over secret affair. That is now elaborated on pages, 2 pages in the middle of the scum. So they're not bothering about that, are they? And then they're back on the sexual kind of goings on. This is Angela Rayner featuring, as if the scum on Sunday of the news of the world, and they're now saying that she's left her husband and she's now with the campaign person, another fellow MP who did her deputy leadership campaign. What I am saying here is that nothing to do with the pandemic crisis. They're totally out of it. And oops, that is a shock. They do believe there is a pandemic, there is a virus. After all, when it comes to the virus being connected with a SNP MP, there is a virus, but only when it affects the SNP's political reputation. And they can then say that she is an idiot. And they say that she is a COVID MP who is insisting she won't quit and couldn't think clearly after virus. Now, if she couldn't think clearly after virus, how is it that Trump can think so clearly? Think about that. They're saying that Trump can do the impossible at age 74. He can defy the virus and he can invite 200 people or hundreds of people in the South Lawn of the White House to thank the people for their prayers who must have given him the miraculous recovery. But no such miracle is remotely likely for a Scottish MP, is there? This is the diagnosis, world exclusive diagnosis of the racist, the corrupt, criminally published Fleet Street papers. And this is the Murdoch scum. Not only is the Angela Rayner kind of leaving her husband feature in the scum, it on page 10, it has got Boris Johnson revealed by Tom Bauer to have had a one-night stand as well. So it's a list of others. I mean, this is the one that also this piece, they credit the serialization that has been published by the Mail on Sunday. And they're saying that this one, this Boris Johnson is accused of romping with a brunette in 2013, that's 7 years ago. And this one was going on, or this one took place while Johnson was having an affair with the American Jennifer Arcuri. Now, this is the first time that we have seen the Murdoch scum use that phrase, affair, Jennifer Arcuri, whom they have been shielding from being associated with any evidence or any allegation based on her relationship with Johnson when he was mayor at the expense of London. Now that phrase, when we use the expense, at the expense of either housing in the case of Robert Jenrick or expense of London in the case of anyone who is mayor, that includes Sadiq Khan and includes his predecessors, including Johnson and Ken Livingstone. The reason why we use the expression at the expense is twofold. One is that the post is not being held by someone, the given person that we name at the time, who is delivering what is supposed to be his job or their job. I mean, in these cases, all of them are male, so I'm saying his. But it is possible to refer to her job in the case of Newham, where Roxana Fiaz is the mayor at the expense of the people of Newham. Now, first time, this Common Sunday has actually expressly said that Boris Johnson and Jennifer Arcuri were having an affair. He was having an affair with her. Now, they also give a list of other women that he has had affairs with and has kind of been involved with, while he was having a life as a married person with Marina Wheeler, etc. The point is that Boris Johnson is being featured in this kind of story as a deflection, as a kind of diverting of attention away from his failures and his dishonesty. And that is the point that partly made by one of the Murdoch favorites among the Labour politicians, one of the servants of Murdoch's agenda, which is the former Home Secretary David Blindgate. Now, the Blindgate has the blindness is in the sense of his blindness to the truth. not his physical blindness. Now, he is one of the kind of stooges that have been exploiting, abusing the Labour Party and serving the cause and the corrupt agenda of the Conservatives. And he is also somebody who knows or shares the platform of the Spectator magazine. Because while Johnson was editor of the Spectator and David Blunkett wasn't involved as a editorial or executive, his mistress, the Canadian woman, was working as the publisher of the Spectator. So, and but here in this piece, that is byline to Blunkett, who is called former Labour Home Secretary. And here he is saying that Dido Harding, who is the kind of favorite kind of appointee to lead the test of the virus kind of regime, and who was made a member of the House of Peers by David Cameron, he's saying, Blunkett is saying that the fact that she is still there after all the lies and other, secrecy and incompetence have come out, shows that this is the norm for this government. So let's read this paragraph or two to get a kind of fuller kind of picture of what Blunkett is actually saying, or what this edited piece byline to him is saying. The essence of a democracy is that you know whose head should roll when things go wrong. But after almost a year of mishap and muddle, it's unclear who is making all the big decisions about Britain's pandemic response. And despite endless gaffes, not a single minister or official has resigned or been fired. Above all, it is the testing fiasco which has me wondering if Boris Johnson is prepared to sack somebody when things go badly wrong. In fact, he would be forgiven for thinking those who make the biggest mistake are untouchable. Take Baroness Dido Harding, in charge of the NHS test and trace system. There is anger over the glitch that meant nearly 16,000 positive test results were left off last week's official daily figures for confirmed cases. It's estimated these people could have potentially infected 50,000 contacts. Yet Baroness Harding is still in her job. Meanwhile, across the land, our communities don't know if they are coming or going over the so-called second spike. Now, whatever the rest of it is, this piece contradicts the Sun's policy of celebrating the biggest liar on the pandemic, Donald Trump. They're saying he's trumped it. They're not questioning anything he's saying. And they are practicing the pornographic kind of trade by flashing on the front page the story of adultery, and then running a story about Angela Rayner, running a story about Boris Johnson, all to do with everything to do with sex and adultery. They are denying the seriousness and the serious matter. So to give David Blunkett a platform like that is trebly dishonest and corrupt and lying. And Blunkett would do anything. Blunkett would do anything if it benefits him. Blunkett is a completely unprincipled person. When in the 80s he was leader of the Sheffield City Council, he was one of the kind of Labour city councils or borough councils that were kind of invited to the Greater London Council, then fronted by the coup meister Ken Livingstone Livingstone, who had staged the coup against Andrew McIntosh in May 1981. And Blanket was given platform to spiel about the wisdom, his wisdom about running local democracies. And he was even mentioned as a socialist, or probably he himself did that. At one rally that I attended, strictly to gather evidence and to observe the criminals at work, I remember Blanket being treated as a seriously important socialist. It was almost about the same time, I think, that Paul Foot was also part of the invited kind of socialists, invited to exclusive platforms and audiences provided by Ken Livingstone Livingstone. And Ken Livingstone Livingstone was being peddled by mostly kind of propagandists that he had paid money from the GLC's kind of budget as the kind of biggest revolutionary icon that the world had ever seen. So anyone who hasn't viewed this program or has not read my diagnostic pieces over the last decades covering the GLC and what I did may be entitled to know this short statement. I had to conduct one-person engagements against Livingstone's lying on at least 250 to 300 separate occasions during about 5 years. During 5 years that I spent most of the days at the county hall, as it was then, which is situated on the southern kind of bank of the River Thames, opposite the Palace of Westminster, for those who are not familiar with London geography. And the reason I did that was because there was nobody, not a single political activist or campaigner or thinker or journalist or anybody that was even noticing Ken Livingstone's daily lies. Anyone who thinks that Donald Trump is the only one who has been lying may be kind of excused, because most of the people who are aware of the office of the USA president would not necessarily be aware of a place that was called the Greater London Council. But it was Ken Livingstone that almost 40 years ago began in a kind of big way to abuse the position and tell lies by hiring and bribing a lot of gullible journalists, so-called, and propagandists. And I had the duty, moral duty, to actually confront him. So I confronted him at least 250 to 300 separate occasions and events, all staged in the county hall, which is no longer used for the so-called municipal government or misgovernment, but is now the location for various businesses, including many international outfits brought from Japan and other places where they have got hired spaces and they're running their businesses, whatever they are. So this exclusive diagnosis includes exclusive insights into events that were taking place nearly 40 years ago, and the Fleet Street media didn't report any of this. Now, the Daily Boris Graph is one of the Fleet Street outlets in the early 1980s that had a regular kind of reporter or correspondent stationed at the county hall. But they were interested mainly in spotting left-wing excesses. I can say to anyone viewing this and to the Telegraph liars that the GLC was not a left-wing in the sense of a socialist outfit whatsoever. It was a corrupt, locally kind of elected, well, locality meaning the whole of London electors, locally kind of, quote, elected platform grabbed by a bunch of criminally selfish, irresponsible careerist opportunists posing as socialists. Well, the posers, the most corrupt, toxic, poisonous poser was Ken Livingstone himself and his cabal that included John McDonnell, who is still an MP and who was the shadow finance minister under the frontage of the Labour Party parliamentary leadership, personified by the garden gnome Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, 39 years ago, I noticed John McDonnell being unfit for high public responsibility because he was very narrow-minded and not very enlightened and not very informed. And he proved his lack of knowledge by endorsing this candidate at the time, now the MP for, or at the expense of Limehouse and Poplar, Afsana Begum. He said that she represented the grassroots. Well, she completely may represent any fantasy kind of scenario that the ignorant likes of John McDonnell may think, but she doesn't represent the community that I have defended since long before she was even born. Now, that kind of idiocy peddled from the platforms that they occupy only emboldens the likes of Dirty Digger Murdoch, who can then assail them with impunity, which they have done. Ken Livingstone's GLC image, on the one hand, he had an image of being the world's socialist revolutionary icon, paraded by the people who he bribed, not with his money, but the money that belonged to the people of London. One of the bribed kind of paraders of Ken Livingstone's image was the Riffraff Ali of the Hansib publishing. Trinidad and Tobago originated Hansib Ali, otherwise Arif Ali, whom I call Riffraff Ali because of his role as the riffraff and the corrupter of the particular section of the community he claimed to represent. He was given money under the banner of Caribbean Times. And later, on a second thought, he thought that it would be useful in terms of getting the GLC money. So he started a thing called Asian Times, not because he understood anything that distinguished the Caribbean and the Asian or identified with the struggles of the people of Asian background or of the Caribbean background. It was just a simple way to grab as much money from the GLC as possible. And he then Riffraff Ali devoted the entirities of these publications to singing the praise of Ken Livingstone as the GLC leader. And there were others less kind of pervasive in terms of the money they received from the GLC and in terms of the actual spread of their so-called newspapers. There was a Gujarati origin, but coming from East Africa, man called Patel. So in the Black Parents Journal, I have extensively diagnosed and detailed the behavior of Riffraff Ali and also this Patel. And I have given actual evidence of how the Patel and the Rifraf Ali corrupted the particular kind of corners of the communities by praising Ken Livingstone Livingstone the beyond the remotest foundation, in fact. And they sabotaged the democratic campaigns across the country that was really being affected by the misconduct in London. Remember, we're talking about David Blunkett and how I came across Blunkett at the county hall during the time of Ken Livingstone's corrupt frontage of the GLC, where I also met or saw or witnessed Paul Foot. Now, I've discussed Paul Foot's racism before, so I'm not going to repeat that now. But if necessary, I shall be updating on Paul Foot in due course. We shall be going on to Karen Brady on page 11. Is it page 11? Page 13 of the Scum on Sunday in the next edition, because we need to take a break for the technical reasons.